Welcome to the Basement Series. I'm Lauren Holzer.
I'm Shane Floyd.
And we have a special guest today.
Sandra Trani.
Hey, Sandra.
Sorry, I missed my cue.
We didn't tell Sandra to introduce
We did not
herself.
rehearse. We did not rehearse this.
We've all worked together for quite a while now. Sandra, how long have you been at Blackbaud?
Hit my 10-year anniversary.
Oh,
Right
happy anniversary. Cheers.
Thank you. Drinks to that.
Cool. Cheers.
Oh.
Sandra's drinking a Negroni. If you watched episode 5, you know all about Negronis.
And how they're
And
not
pierogies. Yeah.
Other issues. We asked Sandra to join us partly because people, I talk to a lot of clients who are confused about merchant processing and what are all the ins and outs of merchant processing and what is a payment gateway? What is a processor, et cetera. Lots of questions come up. If somebody made a donation today, why is the money not in my bank the next day or sooner? You know, that type of thing. So I thought we'd just talk about it. We don't have a formal scripted plan for the meeting today, but
no, we don't.
I looked at your PowerPoint, Sandra, and I thought there were 3 slides that kind of had a flow. To me, that one was the most appealing. I don't know if you want to maybe share that and just kind of walk through it, or Lauren, if you've got other things to help kind of frame this up, thoughts and ideas on it. Do you run into this too, where people ask about it during demos and stuff?
We do. And it honestly, the thing about credit card processing is there's a lot of options, right? And so you might have a number of different options, or you're just really familiar with what you're using today. But there are ways that we can kind of help organizations streamline their credit card processing, make it more simple. And, the way that people are giving, especially now, is online. So people are using their credit cards.
So you've asked probably the right person to come join you, because I've been doing this for probably 25 years at this point. So I did just celebrate my 10th anniversary of Blackbaud. I was the first employee in when we released Blackbaud Merchant Services 10 years ago. So I spent the last 18 months on the solutions engineering team, and then came back into payments when we decided to centralize all that stuff. So I kind of feel like 10 years, I've been just gone full circle in the 10 years, and I'm back to payment.
Hang on.
So right now I'm in my office, which is also my guest room. And I know you can kind of see that there's like pillows behind me. So the other day I was on a call with somebody and they turned on their camera. I mean, you saw their whole entire bedroom. The bed was not made. It looked like they literally just rolled out of it. The person was wearing like a white t-shirt, and there were clothes. The closet door was open, clothes everywhere.
Oh gosh.
I was like, angle your camera a little bit or something.
This work from home thing, you gotta work the angles.
I'll tell you what I like probably the most about, and I've been working from home for a long time, but the people that you work with that you don't necessarily enjoy like interacting with all that much in the past, like you find new cool things about them when you see them in their home environment and their cute little kid is sitting on their lap, or this one gentleman had this big fluffy cat with the tail that kept on like wrapping itself around the neck, and he kept on pushing it to the floor and it kept on jumping up. I'm like, oh wow, he's not such a bastard after all.
Exactly.
I love it.
It definitely humanizes people, I think, and it kind of gives a whole new personalization to working with individuals, that's for sure. So if you hear my husband in the background right now, the whole point of me starting that was he's right now talking for my daughter's dolls, and I hear him doing a Tiana voice. And he's like, well, Cece, we can't go downstairs.
I love it.
I had a conference call with a lot of folks in payments, and we had this one woman who's left Blackbaud, but she apparently lived in a very small place with her husband, and he would like work out behind her. So like the whole shirtless thing and working out and push-ups and all. And we're like, not that I mind or anything, but can you like fuzz out the background there? And that was hilarious. She's so embarrassed.
So funny.
It is funny though, like interesting, like everybody's got, I think, plenty of grace, and it's not like oh, they should be more professional. But once in a while, you're like, maybe a little bit more professional.
Yeah, you're right.
This
you're right.
is too much, man. Oh gosh.
There's like sort of a limit to it. That is true.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be
for
a lot of bloopers, a lot of Zoom meeting bloopers that are going to come out of this year.
Oh, that would be a hilarious little skit.
Yeah.
Oh, I can share my screen. Oh, okay.
There we go.
There you go.
While we're doing
Let's
this.
jump in.
Right.
Well, one of the things I meant to say when I was introducing you, Sandra, was that, anytime if it's a standard question about merchant processing, what's your rate, et cetera, I can answer that stuff. But most of the time, if there's a more detailed question, I don't even bother going to anybody else because I know
you come to me.
Get a good answer. I know Sandra can actually give me the correct answer. So I go to her and she understands the ins and outs of it. So let's try to demystify it for people and hopefully whether they're using, we'd love it if they're using Blackbaud Merchant Services, but if they're not, they'll gain some clarity today about how it works in general, how money moves around and credit cards are processed and all that.
Okay. So merchant services outside of Blackbaud is a bit of a commodity. You do want to buy it for as cheap as you can possibly buy it because you really don't get anything besides moving numbers from point A to point B. Here it's a little bit different. It's a lot different. And you saw me click on that. My deck is actually entitled Shane Floyd. Okay, so it's thinking about
how it works.
And the Shane Floyd How It Works deck.
I've never had to tell Shane how something works ever.
I know that when he comes to me, he's already done his due diligence.
Exactly, that is a great thing. And he's very thoughtful about it, and he knows exactly what he wants to understand.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm not afraid to. I mean, a lot of times people don't want to sound dumb, so they just won't ask. But I'm like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't understand. I think it's good to be curious. I think that's actually one of the core values of my team. We have like a list of core values, and being curious is one of them.
Oh, that's great, man. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's important to ask questions and be humble enough to ask those questions.
Yeah. So this is basically how payments flow in a very 30,000 foot view. So they start at the point of sale, and the point of sale could be in a shoe store where you give somebody your credit card and the card gets swiped through this terminal, or it could be online, somebody going to a website. In our case at Blackbaud, y'all are using a website or some product that puts up a donation page for you, and a customer or donor would go to your website and make a donation online. So the solution here, even though it looks like a little terminal, where it actually should have a computer on it. I think that might be a better graphic. So from that solution, the first place that transaction goes to is your credit card processor. In the case of the Blackbaud Merchant Services, that is Blackbaud. Blackbaud's your credit card processor. If you're banking, or if you have a merchant relationship with, say, Bank of America Merchant Services, they are your credit card processor. So the transaction is going to go to Bank of America for processing. After authorization and settlement is done, then the money gets moved. The money gets moved to the cardholder's bank where it's debited and it's credited to the merchant account. So the information flows back and forth because there's transaction information that goes all the way to the cardholder bank and waits for an authorization. And then whether it's an authorization or decline, the information flows back to the merchant terminal, or in this case, Blackbaud software. So that's what this slide is talking about. It's really the authorization process. And I think the next slide goes into a little bit more detail on that. Actually, what this slide does is shows specifically how it works at Blackbaud. So the blue bar is Blackbaud software, is the point of origin. That's the point of sale for all of our software applications. The first place the transaction goes to is in something called the Blackbaud Payment Services Vault, otherwise known as BBPS, not to be confused with BBMS. So I'll try to explain the difference. When you payment process out of a Blackbaud application, you have to use Blackbaud Payment Services. You have to use BBPS. And the reason being is because this is how we secure the transaction. This is how we make it PCI compliant. So we encrypt it, we make it a nice tight little bundle that can't be hacked, and we send that little bundle to the payment gateway, and the payment gateway sends it to the processor. Now, a gateway is really just middleware. It sits in the middle of BBPS and your payment processor. This is because it's impossible for Blackbaud to write directly, to automate a connection directly with every single processor that exists in the universe, because there's thousands of them. So what we do is we've connected to a certain number of gateways, and I'll give you an example. CyberSource, Authorize.net, Payflow Pro, owned by PayPal. Others I can't remember right now, to be honest. So Moneris, I think, in Canada, some others. So those, let's take Authorize.net, for example, is middleware. It takes the transactional information that comes out of our software, and it converts the language and then sends it to the payment processor in a way that the payment processor can understand the language. That's all it is. It's a payment gateway. It's a service that they're providing. If you liken it to, you're going overseas and you have a hair dryer. Shane's hair, is famous for his hair dryers. So
Yeah.
you've got, yeah. So you have the little widgets that plug into the outlet to convert the currency so that you don't burn out your, same idea. It's converting, instead of an electrical currency, it's converting language to a format that the payment processor understands. So from the gateway, it goes to the processor. Now, just to muddy the water, because it's fun to do that, the payment gateway can be the same thing as the payment processor. Or it could be something different. It could be, so for example, maybe the payment gateway is Authorize.net, but the payment processor is Bank of America Merchant Services.
Wow.
However, that can happen. It could also happen where your payment gateway is Authorize.net, but you also use Authorize.net as a payment processor.
That's why it gets so confusing to people.
Yeah, I could see that.
What do you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm confused by that too.
Yes.
But Authorize.net would, okay, I'm just going to use my cursor.
Yeah, for an example.
So the payment services is encrypting the data and keeping it safe, delivering it to the payment gateway, and let's just stick with the Authorize.net for a minute. Authorize.net would be a translator to itself or to a number of other processors.
Correct.
It would take that encrypted data and flow it all the way through to the processor.
That is correct.
Okay, and then you're going to tell us what happens at the processor level, right?
Yes. So I think we can go maybe to the next slide. Might have a bit better of an idea.
Just to round out this slide, though, it goes from that gateway to the processor, and from the processor, it moves around between the donor.
So the payment processor has to then send that message that they receive from the gateway. It has to send it to the bank that issued the credit card. So if you're using a Wells Fargo credit card, your payment processor will send a message to Wells Fargo and say, is there enough room to buy for a $50 donation or $100, whatever it is? And then Wells Fargo will send back a message, yes, approved, no, declined. So that information has to flow back, and it comes back through the payment processor, back through the gateway, back through BBPS, and into the software. All this happens in a split second, which is fairly amazing to me, because it goes a long way.
It is amazing.
It goes a long way. And think about it, works the same way internationally too. So it goes all around the globe. That's why when it gets a little frustrating when folks get really firm on, well, I want all my data to stay in the US, or I want all my data to stay in Canada. It's not possible. The second you take an out-of-country credit card, that number, data is flowing all over the world. Okay, so what ends up happening is it goes to the card issuing bank. The card issuing bank makes the approval. And then when that donation is then settled, the cardholder's bank is debited for the transaction. The merchant account is credited for the transaction. This is how the money flows. It's all electronic money at this point.
This is a good visual. And Sandra, from what I'm reading here, BBMS is both a payment gateway and a payment processor, just as authorized.
That is correct. So in the case, and what I like to point out is with Blackbaud Merchant Services, everything is held in-house. So it's Blackbaud software, the Blackbaud Payment Services Vault, and then BBMS as the gateway and the processor. So this is why we're able to provide some extra level of security, PCI compliance for our customers, because the transaction never leaves the house. It always stays within Blackbaud. So we always know exactly how PCI compliant a transaction is, which means that unlike other payment processors that make their customers prove that they are PCI compliant by filling out questionnaires and doing audits, we don't do that because we know the transaction is secure. So it saves a bit of time and it saves a bit of money.
I remember doing that for PCI compliance, so that's interesting. I didn't know about that.
Yep.
Cool.
All right.
So then it goes back to the merchant account, and then the merchant account, in the case we're talking about Blackbaud, and then it disperses it to the organization or nonprofit's bank account.
Right, and whatever the bank is, whatever, it doesn't have to be it could be a checking account, it could be a savings account, business account, what have you. It goes to whatever bank you want us to deposit that to.
Okay, and I think when we go to the next slides, we're going to be restating a lot of the same stuff in just a different way. But if you don't mind me maybe just drilling down on this, so it comes all the way through and says, hey, is there enough money on Shane's account? And it says yes or no, comes back and it processes it. And then the money moves out of the donor's bank account and into the merchant account. And then the merchant can disperse that based upon the agreed upon frequency. So in some cases, our clients are on daily disbursement. Some cases are on once a week.
Correct.
But regardless, let's just say the client is on daily disbursement. That doesn't mean that the money is
24 hour.
The next day. Why is that?
Why?
People are always,
Good question. Yes. So what most folks don't quite realize is when they receive money today, it's not from yesterday's transactions. It's likely from 2 or 3 days previous. So 48 to 72 hours is pretty common delay in merchant processing. Blackbaud tends to be very risk adverse. And so we have a 5-day program, and then we also can speed that up to a 72-hour program with, raise your hand and let us know that that's something you want. So the reason being is because the actual process of moving money from the bank through this process, it uses the ACH service, which is automated clearinghouse service. I think you're probably familiar with the word ACH. That's a 48-hour service. It takes 48 hours for that to move from point A to point B. The only way to get 24-hour funding is to bank with your merchant services provider. So if you need 24-hour funding, then go get yourself a bank account at Bank of America and use Bank of America Merchant Services. And what will then happen is, because Bank of America will have, in this case, okay, it could be any bank really, but Bank of America in this example already has an existing relationship with you, not just for merchant services, but for banking, etc. There is a pile of money in your bank account that can cover any chargebacks or anything like that that might occur in the time a transaction travels or the money travels from point A to point B. So they have the ability to memo post money to your bank account. Now, a memo post is not a hard post of cash. A memo post is like, we liken this to Blackbaud. So Monday's the 31st, it's our payday, right? but you know darn well that you don't have to wait for Monday to get that money. If you look in your bank account on Saturday afternoon, you'll see it memo posted there. Now, if you go and try to pull out your entire bank account balance on Saturday, you are not going to get all that money that's granted to you for your paycheck. You'll have to wait till Monday for the hard post for that to happen. It's all electronic shell game in a way. I don't mean to say that so negatively, but it's memo posting after 24 hours. Yes, you have your money there. You might be able to withdraw all of it if you have a bank account balance that covers what your merchant account balance is. But other than banking with your merchant services provider, you're going to have to wait at least 48 hours. American Express definitely takes longer. And it's what Blackbaud will do is we actually wait the extra 24 hours for American Express deposits to hit, because it's a 72-hour process. And then we take all those funds and deposit it to you at the same time. Outside of Blackbaud, you'll get a Visa MasterCard deposit, maybe at 48 hours, and an American Express deposit the next day. So it makes reconciliation a little bit nutty. But we're used to it because that's the way it's been working since the 70s when people started using Bank AmeriCards, Visa charge cards. It's always been that way. So it becomes something that we're quite used to. So when Blackbaud kind of monkeys with the system a little bit, it's a little bit like, why do you do it that way? And it's because we're trying to make this an easier reconciliation process for you, quite honestly.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I did not know all that, which maybe I shouldn't admit. I mean, I have been.
No, why would you know that? I mean, why would you know that? Right.
Yeah, most people don't know that.
My dad's a banker, so maybe I should.
I'm sure he told you all this at one time, Lauren. You just were not.
Well, I always say he's a lender, and I always ask him like how the counter works. He's like, I don't know. I've never worked at the counter before. I don't know.
Does he do mortgages?
Mm-mm.
You do mortgages for regular people?
Commercial lending.
I got you. Okay. Well, let's go to the next slide. I think I still probably have some lingering questions, but this is helpful so far.
It might get answered in another slide.
48, 72 hours. Yeah, and I think what it was going through my head is when I'm looking at my Wells Fargo account, it'll say it's got an in-process bucket.
Correct.
And then an actual hard closed transactions.
What I'm talking, that's a memo post.
Yeah.
Or a soft post. Okay.
So a different look at the same stuff.
This is just straight up the authorization process. So if you start on the left with the cardholder who is making a donation or tithing, if you're faith-based. So it makes a donation to the Blackbaud customer. And then what happens, and Blackbaud is the merchant provider. So we send the credit card details that we've gathered out of the software and out of BBPS. We send that, it comes out of the software, it's sent to Blackbaud, the acquirer. Now we're right in the middle of the slide. And then we send the information through the credit card networks, and the credit card networks are just MasterCard, Visa, American Express, Discover. It sends there. By the way, the associations are the folks who get to decide which banks issue which kind of credit cards, because some banks only issue MasterCards and some banks only issue Visa. American Express doesn't involve themselves with banks at all. And some banks do all of it, like Chase, for example. So it goes to
American
the card.
Express has nothing to do with banks. I did not know that.
It cuts that piece out completely.
Insight to American Express. I've never had an American Express card, I gotta admit. I don't know if that's, if I lack a certain amount of class and prestige.
Well, you're so classy, Shane. You're super classy.
Oh yeah, thank you.
What's interesting about American Express is it owns about 20% of market share, I want to say, in terms of credit cards. However, it's statistically, when people donate on an American Express card, they'll donate up to 40% more than if they reached into the same wallet and pulled out a Visa or a MasterCard.
See what I'm saying?
It's that class.
These people are next level.
A lot wealthier.
I am not. Okay, something to aspire, something to work towards.
I know what you're doing after this. You're going to sign up for an American Express.
American Express also historically, I mean, they have balance cards now, but historically you'd have to pay off your balance in full each month. So it was like just a completely different scheme as to how they lent credit to the consumer. So anyhow, it goes to the associations. The associations then have the direct connection to all the banks that issue credit cards. So again, it's much easier for Blackbaud and everyone, not just Blackbaud, but all processors, to send your credit card information, the transaction information to the associations, and then the associations disperse it out to all the banks that issue credit cards. That's at the issuing bank level is where the authorization actually happens. And I think the next slide gives you the reverse process of once the authorization is grabbed from the issuing bank, if the funds are available.
We're starting down here. We left off here. We left off right here, right?
Right. So now we're at number 2. Yes.
Right here. Okay.
Okay, so the authorization and an approval code is sent backwards. Now, first of all, before it's sent backwards, there's a fee taken out of this transaction from the issuing banks. But I think the next slide goes through that a lot better. Okay. So it goes back to the card issuer. I'm sorry, with the association. The association then sends it to the acquirer, Blackbaud. We send it to our customer, and the customer then knows whether it's approved or declined. And if it's approved, then they issue a receipt for the donation.
Yeah, and I get the question often, what exactly, how does I guess the merchant, so the organization, know that transaction has been approved? And it's instant. Like this is how it works if you go to the store.
Yeah, the approval code.
Exactly. So you're always going to know that when someone makes a donation, the donor themselves will know instantly that, oh no, that's not approved, or it is. And you don't have to, as an organization, worry about that.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So let me ask something you said there, Sandra. You mentioned that a processing fee is deducted. Is that right, even if it's declined?
Correct. Even if it's declined. So now let's talk about, if you start at the right with the issuing bank, these fees that the issuing bank takes out, it's called interchange. And these are the variable fees that vary depending upon how the transaction was conducted, whether it was card present, card not present, mobile swipe, whatever it is. It also varies based on the card type, whether it was a debit card or a credit card or a corporate card, whatever. I literally have a book of all the interchange types, and there's a fee associated with all of them. So there's all kinds of rules. It's almost like tax law, trying to figure out, well, okay, it was a credit card processed on this day, settled on the same day for under $100, and you got to try to figure out what that fee actually is. So the issuing bank charges, actually the total of the total fee, 75% of our customers' total fee goes back to the issuing bank.
Okay.
All right, so it's a big chunk. So yeah, and think about it a little further. I mean, banking's not a bad business to be in, because not only are you getting paid dues every time your card's issued, but you also are being paid interest for any balance, late fees, etc. So they're actually getting paid on both sides of the transaction. So not a bad business to be in. Yeah. All right, so once the issuing bank pulls out their interchange fees, it goes over to the association, and the association pulls out a fee as well.
And this is the association right here.
Right, that's MasterCard, Visa, American Express, Discover. They pull out an association fee, which is generally a very small number, maybe 5 to 10 basis points. It varies a little bit based on the association, but it's not a big number. But then again,
5 to 10 basis points, how does that translate for a commoner?
So if you have a 3% your cost is 3% on a transaction. 0.10% of that would be an association fee. Or 1% of that.
Let's take the $100 transaction, 3%.
Yeah, make it, so 3% is $3.
Mm-hmm.
So don't make me do math after I've had a Negroni.
Well, the basis points you're saying would be like, it'd be one of those 3%.
0.0933% or 0.822. It depends a little bit, but it's a
so it'd be
very
about $1 of the $3 transaction fee. It'd be a little less than $1.
Yeah, it'd be less than $1. Okay, so that comes out through the assessments, and then it goes to the acquirer. That's Blackbaud. So Blackbaud now has a net fee. I'm sorry, a net cost here. So if it's a $100 transaction, the issuing bank took out their 2%, the card networks took out their percentage, and we have what remains. And then we take out our fees the way Blackbaud works. We net out our fees, and then we send the rest to the merchant or the customer in this case. Other providers go ahead and send the gross amount of what's left. The gross amount goes over to the customer, and then they'll pull a debit from the customer's bank account once a month for all their fees in aggregate. So they'll get a statement, usually the first 3 to 5 days of the month, and the statement will tell them everything that deposited the month prior and what all the fees are, and then the debit comes out of their bank account that matches the fees on the statement. And that's how they do it. Blackbaud, not being a full, I mean, we do more than just credit card processing here, right? So, I mean, granted, we have over 10,000 BBMS customers, which is a lot. It makes us a pretty good size processor. However, it's a part of what we do overall. This isn't the sole thing that we do. So we net out our fees, the 2.798% to, let's call it 2.8% and 26 cents, and we send the rest to the merchant. That way so we don't. Go ahead.
If you don't mind me asking, I know I'm kind of drilling in on the math, but all this math that's happening over here with the issuing bank and the association is not relevant to our client over here. All they are worried about is our 2.798 and 26 cents.
Right. Correct? Now that's because the other fees are included in that 2.798 and 26 cents.
Right. It's sort of bundled in. They don't have to worry about this because of the $100 gift, they would have had $2.80 removed plus the 20, so $3 would have been removed. $3 and
it's called $3
would have been removed. So these details of how much this bank, I mean, it's nice to know about. I'm glad we talked about it, but it's not something our client
something that our customer has to worry about. Although they might, there are different pricing schemes, and one of the pricing schemes, something I used to sell quite a bit, is something called Cost Plus. So that's where I let my customers know exactly what the issuing bank charged me, exactly what the association fees are, and then exactly what my markup is, what my margin is, whether it's 50 basis points or 100 basis points, which is 1%. So whatever, it's very transparent. However, it makes for an incredibly long statement, like 20, 30 pages for a decent sized customer. Not the easiest to read, but it's very transparent. What Blackbaud does is simplifies the process when you use BBMS and bundles everything into one cost to kind of, help the reconciliation process along. Not all of our customers are gigantic, obviously. Most of them are quite small to medium size. So for this process makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. I definitely like the simplified sort of, what's our, they don't have to ask, well, what's our American Express rate versus our
it's not
covered rate. It's just one rate for everything. And
and so many folks don't even take American Express because the rates tend to be pretty high. They tend to be in the 3.5% range. the larger customers can negotiate a little bit better rate, but for us, we charge the same rate for everything. So there is zero reason not to take American Express, particularly when you think about the statistic of that 40% more spend on Amex.
So interesting. Seems like more people would, on their donation form, when you've got the little image of Visa and MasterCard, you'd maybe even make the American Express a little more prevalent to kind of nudge somebody in that direction.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think people with American Express cards generally gain a lot of points or miles or whatever it is. So they generally reach for their Amex first, but it's just not as readily available as Visa, MasterCard.
Interesting. Okay, so we go to... Yeah, sorry.
When this comes into, so one thing that gets confusing to my customers, I know, is once they make that $100 donation, that $100 goes into their database, right, as a donation from Lauren, but into their bank account, it was $97 or whatever the math ends up working out. How do you suggest that people reconcile? Yeah.
So think about how it works outside of Blackbaud, which is they get, if Lauren donates $100, they get $100 deposit. They can, match 1-to-1, and then the next month they're going to get a debit, and they're going to have to create a line item debit for their entire, not just Lauren's donation, but everybody's donation for the month. And they have to create a debit in their, general ledger to account for payment processing fees. The difference here, it's the same process, except instead of doing it once a month for a big lump sum, we give them the tools to be able to do a daily reconciliation if they really wanted to. So what we do is in our daily summaries or daily reports, you can see all the transactions that occur. You can see Lauren's transaction for $100. You can see the $3.05 that was debited for the fees. And then we know that the gross amount less the fee amount equals your net amount. And it's one place to reconcile the general ledger, the database, whatever the database record is. All of it is all reconciled on one report. So that's the benefit of using BBMS, is it provides you a one-to-one correlation between what you see on your report versus what's on the bank account, and it gives you detail by donor. So I know that makes no sense to you all, but if you're with Bank of America, Wells Fargo, TSYS, whoever it is, you don't get that kind of detail.
No. Yeah.
That's the beauty of the integration that BBMS has with our software. So you know exactly who gave you a donation and how much in fee you paid for that particular donation. And then pretty soon here, towards the end of the year and into the first half of 2021, we'll be bringing out donor cover, which allows a donor to add an additional X amount. We actually do the calculation for them so they can figure out what the amount is to cover any processing fees. So instead of giving $100, Lauren, maybe you give $103, and then that way the the customer actually receives $100 and their fees have been paid by you.
I see.
So that's something we're really excited about coming down the pike through OLX first, I believe. Before OLX should be before the end of the year, but you know how things go at Blackbaud. It could be a little longer, but it's something that we want to roll out to every product by next summer for sure.
We do already have some clients and some products that do that based on kind of customizations we've delivered, but you're talking a standard.
Just standard out of the box. Well, Just Giving does do that out of the box, right?
Just Giving doesn't cover processing fees. They actually cover, no, that's fine. They cover the transaction, the network or platform fee. I think that's what they call it, the platform fee.
Gotcha. Okay.
We went through the authorization process on the prior screen. Now, once the authorization is made, it's a good transaction and you have an authorization code. Now we're talking about clearing and settlement. And if you start down with the circled number one.
Okay, so let's pick up, let me go back one step. We've already run it back. It's gone
All the way to the receipt back to the cardholder.
Step one, all the way over to the issuing bank. Then we went from the issuing bank back to the merchant.
Now we're talking about the end of the day when you get to settle your batch. And everything's automatically settled at Blackbaud, so no customer has to do a manual settlement, which is true of some other software and, you know, POS devices. Yeah. But what happens?
Point of sale is what she's talking about.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Point of sale.
We weren't talking about. Yeah, never mind.
That's the only thing I know POS for, by the way. So you'll have to clue me in later.
I thought you were talking about some of our competitors' solutions, which we also refer to as POS.
Yeah.
It's, you know, something totally different. So I'm sorry, I got you off track.
Good one.
Yeah.
All right, so starting from number one, that's circled. This is when the batch clears the software. It goes through BBPS to Blackbaud as your acquirer, and then we forward the batch to the credit card networks and set with a notice that says, okay, these transactions are now settled. This kicks off the process that the networks will send to the issuing bank, and the process of debiting money from the cardholder and crediting to the merchant or our customer actually occurs. So the issuing bank gets a notification, these are the settled transactions. And now we're talking about, and this is talking about the fees here. So number 4, the issuing bank transfers the funds to the acquirer, less the interchange fee. And then I think we got ahead of ourselves a little bit on the prior slide. So it's less the interchange fee. And then the network send it back to Blackbaud, that's hard to say, less the association fees. And then we send it back to the customer. If they're using BBMS, we'll send it less the BBMS fee. So we're taking a little bit comes out. Blackbaud pays the association and the issuing banks, and then the merchant pays Blackbaud for the entire process. And of course, all this happens, particularly the authorization happens within fractions of a second to a couple seconds. It's not a long process at all. It's amazing how fast that actually goes. So that's it. And then at the end of the month, or whenever the cardholder gets their statement, they'll see on their statement the donation that they made. And then it's up to them to pay their bank fees.
Okay. Yeah, this slide's still not quite as clear to me because I'm thinking of Blackbaud as the merchant processing.
Yeah,
and in this slide, we're showing the merchant as really the
is our customer. Yeah, the merchant is our customer. The merchant processor is really the same as the acquirer. I think it's acquirer is the technical term for it, but it is Blackbaud.
And on those, so when somebody makes a donation and it fails, it goes over here, the issuing bank says no, but they take a fee anyway.
Yep, they take a fee. The networks take a fee, and
who does the nonprofit, in this case our customer, do they experience that fee being taken out?
So great question. So if they're using Blackbaud Merchant Services, we do not debit them a fee. So what happens in the industry outside of Blackbaud, if there is a decline, the issuing bank will return the original processing fee, but then charge a decline fee, a processing fee for the decline. So
which
what
may
we
be a
do,
separate, it may be just like a set fee, regardless of how much they actually.
It's usually some strange percentage of the fee. So sadly, it's not a set fee. What we do is try to simplify that. We won't return the original transaction fee, but we don't bill the decline fee. So we do that a little bit differently. Yeah.
So are you saying in short that for our customer, they're using Blackwood Merchant Services, they really don't have to worry about that.
Right. And why this is so important for our customers is because of recurring giving. Our industry does so much in recurring giving, and when you do recurring giving, there is a tremendous amount of declines each month. There is a fair amount every month that everyone experiences because people get paid on different days of the month, and there might be money one day and not the next day. And so we don't bill on declines. I actually did an on-site a couple years ago with a very large organization, and you would think there's no way we would be able to compete on price with their current provider. But when I took a look at it, they were being charged like 50 cents per decline. And this was, it was like a, like a UNICEF or Adopt a Child type of deal where it was like all recurring giving. So their bill monthly was about $80,000 just in decline fees.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it was a big change for them. Yeah, that's a lot of volume. It was a very large work.
Even for my shelter clients, animal shelters, there were some small ones and some big ones, but you and I worked on one not that long ago, and if they had switched to Blackwood Merchant Services, they were going to save 30 to 40 or maybe 50,000 a year.
Goodness.
Processing fees for, a pretty average size nonprofit. It wasn't
right
tiny, but it wasn't gigantic either. And that sounds like a lot of money to me.
Yeah, to me, these are the hidden costs. I think a lot of people like to focus on just, one number or one thing, but there are a lot of hidden costs here that you're showing us. This is so
right. So interestingly enough, it is not an apples to apples comparison when we do that. And it's hard because that's the way it works outside of Blackbaud. We do it different. So there is an education process that has to take place. And sometimes you can get that point across and sometimes you can't. So, we always ask for the opportunity to at least explain what's going on here, because it's not a straightforward, it shouldn't be, well, I get charged this percent and you're charging this percent and it's going to cost me more. No, let's take a look. Let's make sure that that's true.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, I always appreciate it when the client is willing to share their statement with us, like they'll give us 2 or 3 or 4 months worth of statements, and we'll dive in there and do the work. It's math. It's just math. And we go in there and pay attention to the details, and we say, okay, well, you've got a good deal, or hey,
or we can help.
It's pretty cut and dry. If you switch, this is how much you're going to save in hard cost, in addition to just the ease of reconciling and just kind of the simplified sort of benefits.
Shane, that's a really good point, and it makes me think of the reason why we do ask for some statements. It helps us really understand the mix of credit cards that a customer takes, like how many debit cards, how many corporate cards, how many international gifts. All that is important because there's different costs associated with all of those cards. Plus, very often we can help educate a little bit about what these costs are, and like you said, when they do have a good deal and when they don't. It's always helpful to have someone who knows what they're looking at take a look at this stuff. It's really a free service, and we don't hate you if you don't use BBMS. We prefer that you do, obviously, but there are times when I'm like, hello, Mr. Customer, this looks great. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. That's perfect. Well, again, if it's math and the numbers are black and white, they've got, and sometimes I have had clients who have a board member who owns a bank or runs a bank, and it's just like, well, no way, I can't compete with that. They're literally charging you no transaction fees. I'm sorry.
Right. It happens.
I cannot compete with that. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if looks like there's another slide. And again, we might be saying the same thing, just in a different way.
I think this one just shows, for me, what this one shows is why we charge interconnect fee, because people often consider it to be a tax for not using BBMS. And to me, this helps explain why we do what we do. So if you start on the upper left, the green Blackbaud software, The first place the transaction goes to, as I mentioned earlier, is in the PCI compliant vault. This is where security occurs. Now, depending on what you're using as a gateway and a processor, the transaction then splits off. So let's say you're using Blackbaud Merchant Services. We're charging you the one rate or whatever rate you have, and then we deposit to your bank. The little green box all the way around shows you that we control the transaction from end to end, and this is how we can really maintain the top level of PCI compliance. And why we don't ask you to do quarterly questionnaires or charge you a PCI compliance monthly fee, whatever, or an annual fee for that matter, because obviously we know it's all in our purview. We can see what's going on. If, however, you're using a third party, we're still securing that transaction. We have to, by law, we have to secure this transaction, but now we're handing it off to a third-party gateway and processor, and at that point, we have zero idea of what happens to that transaction. We're out of the loop at that point. So the interconnect fee, honestly, is how we cover the costs of providing level 1 PCI compliance to all of our software. If you're a BBMS user, that cost for security is already wrapped up into your fee, into the one rate. If you are not a BBMS user and you go to a third party, it doesn't become a free service for Blackbaud. We're still paying this cost, and it grows year over year. So therefore, we pass the cost or part of the cost on to our customers through an interconnect cost. It's 25 cents a transaction or $25 monthly minimum. It's for the use of the vaulting service.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So I think it ends up making sense to other folks as well when they see it this way. Otherwise, it's just construed as a tax, which it's not. And everyone out there who takes any kind of credit card payments knows exactly how difficult and how costly it is to maintain security on these transactions. So particularly during the time of COVID, lots of fraud going on.
Yeah.
What is IATS?
IATS is a third-party provider. I used to know what that stood for. They're based out of Vancouver. Okay. And before we had Blackbaud Merchant Services, they were our preferred vendor. Gotcha. So if you needed payment processing, we would just send you over to IATS. And they could act as a gateway and a processor, or just the gateway, whatever it was you wanted to use them for. But obviously, as BBMS grew, we refer less to IATS, although customers are still obviously welcome to use them. And most often it's used in Canada.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think I've in the past heard PayPal and PayFlow Pro, those terms or company names anonymously. Are they the same, PayFlow Pro and
so
PayPal?
Good question. The truth is that PayPal is a large organization that owns lots of things. So they own the PayPal wallet type feature, which we are integrating currently, expect a release later on this year. But the PayPal wallet is that little bug that you can put on your page that says click here to pay with PayPal. And a customer puts in their, a donor puts in their credentials and it debits from wherever it debits from. But there is also a gateway called PayFlow Pro, a gateway and a processor, by the way, and it is owned by PayPal. So I always have to dig in, like when somebody says, well, I use PayPal. Well, what does that mean? Like, how do you use PayPal? Like, I have to figure out what question I'm answering before I answer the question. So PayPal is a large organization. They also own Venmo, for that matter.
Right. I love Venmo.
I did not know that.
So when somebody says,
really learned a lot today, I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, man, I love this stuff. I love it. Hey, so when somebody asks me about PayPal, I'm thinking three things. I'm thinking, are you wanting the donor to be able to pay with their PayPal account on the website? That's one.
Correct.
That's not even really on this screen. Unless
it's
you're
not
in the software. Like, as I'm making the donation, I'm selecting my PayPal account. That is an option our clients have in some cases. But they might also be referring to either when they say PayPal, they might really be talking about PayFlow Pro as their gateway,
Correct.
or they could be talking about PayFlow Pro as their gateway and processor.
Right. And that comes up most often with Luminate clients.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so they can use PayPal as a gateway, and then a third party, provider for their processor, or they can use both of those services from PayPal. So yeah, that's where I have most of the conversations around PayFlow Pro, but I'll definitely have to figure out what we're talking about before I go ahead and answer any questions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Cool.
love it.
This is super helpful. I love having smart people who are particularly know, a focused area like this that's confusing to the rest of us. So
Yeah.
I understand why it's confusing, because it took a while to get my head around it, for sure.
There's lots of stops that money has to go through to get.
Oh, we haven't scratched the surface on everything else.
Oh,
yeah.
It's
All right.
so fast too. Well, cool. Thank you, Sandra.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see you again soon.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, we'll schedule it.
Should
All
I
right.
log
See you,
off?
Lauren.
Bye, guys.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.